Hello everyone, this is a listening lecture. Today we are going to take Unit 5, which is entitled Sprawl, and this unit is from Skillful Listening and Speaking 4. You will find a link to download the book in the description below. So in this lecture we are going to take the whole unit and we are going to do all the practice exercises in the book. You need to pause the video several times so you can do the exercises on your own and then revise the answers with me. What is the meaning of sprawl? Sprawl means the spreading out of something or the expansion of something. يعني اللي هو بالعربي التمدد. We are particularly interested in urban sprawl or what we call in Arabic التمدد العمراني. As you can see before you in the picture, urban sprawl refers to the expansion of cities and towns, and it's usually an uncontrolled expansion. And of course, urban sprawl is considered to be a problem because the expansion of cities means that there are less and less green areas. So, this is our main topic in this unit. So, before we listen to any tracks, we are going to discuss some vocabulary. On page 48 of your student book, you will find a table, and above the table, you will find some words, and he wants us to put these words underneath each of the columns in the table. So, the first column is city infrastructure, اللي هي البنية التحتية. And then we have urban issues, problems that arise because of the urban sprawl. And then we have people in the city, places in or around the city, and lastly, city transportation. In order to be able to write down the words that are under each of these columns, we will need to discuss these words first. So let's discuss some of the words that you have on page 48. So the first term that we have is drainage system. Drainage is a method of removing water from a given area. Drainage systems include all of the piping within a private or public property that conveys sewage, rainwater, and other liquid waste to a point of disposal. So, as you can see clearly in the picture, it is a system of pipes that carry the water out from the houses and the buildings and towards a point of disposal. So the drainage system is simply اللي هو الصرف الصحي. Then we have the word freeway. To know what a freeway really is, we need to know what a highway is. So as you can see in the picture, a highway includes several intersections and there are traffic lights and there are probably pedestrians, while the freeway doesn't include that many intersections. All freeways are highways, but not every highway is a freeway. A freeway is a controlled access highway, also known as an express highway, that is designed exclusively for high-speed vehicular traffic. Traffic flow on a freeway is unhindered because there are no traffic signals, intersections, tolls, or at-grade crossings with other roads, railways, or pedestrian paths. So what does this mean? As you can see, all freeways are highways, but not every highway is a freeway. الاتنين دول معناهم الطريق السريع، عارفين حاجة زي الطريق الدائري عندنا كده، هو ده freeway or a highway. طب ايه الفرق؟ إن as we have said, a freeway is designed for high speed traffic. It's not designed to be hindered by traffic flow. يعني على عكس highway بيبقى فيه intersections، يعني تقاطع أكتر من تقاطع. plus pedestrians crossing the street اللي هو المشاة plus tolls اللي هو إن أنت تدفع علشان تعدي من الطريق ده. لكن الفريواي it doesn't have more than one intersection and it doesn't have any pedestrians and it also doesn't have any tolls اللي هي رسوم الدفع لتعدية الطريق. Okay, so a freeway is much faster than a highway and freeways are very common in the US. So this is the difference between a freeway and a highway. Then we move to pedestrian, which I think most of you know. It's a person who is walking, especially in an area where vehicles go. Okay, اللي هو المشاة. And then we have a streetcar or a trolley. ده اللي هو الترام. Okay, an electric vehicle that transports people usually in cities and goes along metal tracks in the road. الترام. Then we have a suburb. A suburb is an area on the edge of a large town or city where people who work in the town or city often live. دي اللي هي ضاحية. Okay, and They're very common in the US. They usually include houses instead of apartments or building blocks, and they have sort of a lot of greenery and a wide street. دول اللي هم زي الكومباوندز بتاعة الفلل اللي بتبقى موجودة عادة بعيد طبعا عن وسط المدينة، زي اللي هم في التجمع الخامس مثلا أو 6 أكتوبر أو هكذا. Okay, so these are the suburbs. Then we have an urban block. An urban block is the smallest group of buildings that is surrounded by streets. زي compound برضو، بس هو مش لازم يبقى برا مدينة مثلا أو يبقى زي الضواحي اللي في the US اللي هي كلها houses not apartments. Just like the picture before you, it could just be a group of buildings and they are surrounded by streets, and it could be in the middle of the city or anywhere. And then we have urban decay, and it's a process by which a previously functioning city or part of a city falls into disrepair, اللي هو التدهور العمراني. As you can see in the picture before you, there are signs of disrepair or deterioration. And lastly, we have urban sprawl. This is rapid expansion of the geographic extent of cities and towns, الزحف العمراني. And this picture illustrates it perfectly. As you can see, in the picture before you, the hand, it's sprawling. It's pushing out the green areas and expanding the cities, the blocks, the concrete. So this is a clear example of urban sprawl. So now that you know the meaning of all of these words, I want you to think about which words belong under the city infrastructure and which words belong under urban issues and which words belong under people in the city, places in the city, or city transportation. Now you can check your answers. Under city infrastructure, there is the drainage system and the freeway, and under urban issues, urban sprawl and urban decay. Under people in the city, we can add pedestrian and merchant, and under places in or around the city, urban block and the suburb. Of course, the urban block is inside the city, while the suburb is outside or around the city. And lastly, city transportation, the trolley or the streetcar, which are one and the same. So these were the main important words in this part of the lesson. And now we are going to do exercise number 2 together. It's complete these definitions with the words from exercise 1. So you have a list of definitions and you need to guess which word in exercise number 1, which we just did together, can correspond to these sentences or these definitions. So the first definition that we have is a wide, fast road in a US city that you do not pay to use. This is of course a freeway اللي هو الطريق السريع زي ما قلنا. Number 2, every city has this is a series of pipes and passages that take water or waste liquid from an area. And this is of course a drainage system. Number 3, one of the main problems in every city is when areas become run down and undesirable to live in. This is called urban decay, of course. Run down here means to be neglected, especially of buildings. Then number 4, the outward spreading of a city is referred to as, of course, to spread out here refers to urban sprawl. This phrase normally has a negative meaning. It comes at the cost of green spaces. Number 5, a watt uses electric power from wires hanging above the road. This is, of course, a streetcar or a trolley, اللي هو الترام. And number 6, someone who works in a town or city is called a pedestrian, of course, زي ما قلنا المشاة. Number 7 is a person who sells goods. This is, of course, very easy. It's a merchant. And number 8, an area of buildings surrounded by streets on 4 sides is called an urban block, as we have said and illustrated in the picture. And lastly, the residential area outside a city normally associated with middle classes, of course he's referring to the suburb. So I guess this exercise was pretty easy if you understood the meaning of each word before doing this exercise. Before we listen to the first track, we have a critical thinking box on page 49, and inside it he is talking about logical order. In lectures, the speaker should present his points in a logical order. So in this lecture, for example, I introduced the meaning of each word and discussed the meaning of each word with you before doing the exercise that included these words. So this is a logical order. I don't just talk about something without introducing it first. And recognizing logical order can help you to anticipate what's coming next or fill in gaps if there are parts of the lecture that you have missed. So logical order is quite important in lectures or in speeches because the listener should be able to recognize this logical order, should be able to anticipate what you are going to talk about next. And also, he should be able to recognize what he might have missed. So, this is quite important because we are going to use this logical order in one of the exercises below. Listening one is about cars and cities, it's about the development of transportation. So before listening to the track, I want you to read the academic keywords on page 49. We have dominate, which is a verb, and it means to be the largest, most important, or most noticeable part of something. So if I say, for example, iPhones dominated the market in 2020, this means that iPhones were the most important or noticeable part of the market in 2020. And then we have eliminate, which is a verb and it means to remove or take away someone or something. And of course, most of you know it. Okay, eliminate يعني يزيل. And then we have gain, it means to increase in weight, speed, height, or amount. So in this track, you are going to listen to how transportation has developed throughout the years. And on page 48, you will find an exercise. He is asking us to listen and take notes for the following dates. So we are going to listen to pre-1880 and then from 1880 to 1920 and post-1920 and 2011. And he wants us to take notes. So just write down the main things that are associated with these years regarding the development of transportation. So this is exercise number 1. We have 2 other exercises that are related to this track, okay, and they are both on page 49, but we are going to do them after we listen to the track because he wants you to develop critical thinking that depends on logical order. We have just talked about logical order, and you should be able to deduce things without actually listening to the track while you are reading the exercise. So we will do this exercise after we listen to the track, this one and this one. So right now, let's listen to the track and then we will do the exercises.
Track 19, Unit 5, Listening 1, Cars and Cities.
There can be few inventions that we know of today that have transformed the cities as much as the automobile. I say this because in the United States of America, where I'm from, it is currently estimated that almost 1/2 of all land in cities is dedicated in one way or another to cars. Streets, roads, parking lots, gas stations, traffic signals, traffic signs, and companies devoted to the automobile industry are such a part of the modern city that we barely notice them. How did cars take over our cities? Let me give you a clear example. If we look at the history of urban growth in the United States, we can see that our cities have gradually evolved due to the automobile. Historians divide the late 19th and 20th centuries into 3 periods. First were the walking cities. This was the model pre-1880. Cities were small and compact, and they featured a mixture of residences and workplaces. People were expected to walk to work, and the rich resided in the center of the cities. This model was the same for many cities around the world that were built more than 200 years ago. The next key period in the development of transportation in the city lasted between 1880 and 1920. The walking city was superseded by the streetcar city. Cities were feeling the impact of industrialization and the arrival of thousands of immigrants to work in the factories. For instance, the upper classes began to flee the city center to live in newly created suburbs. Cities grew, but around public transportation lines, such as trolleys and streetcars. This period came to an end when the automobile became more and more available. The automobile's impact was enormous. Let me explain the reasons why I say that. Suddenly, people had access individually to all kinds of places previously difficult to get to. You could transport yourself and your family wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted. You could access the countryside or go away for the weekend. Most importantly, you didn't need to live close to the place where you worked. So the growth of the suburbs was no longer limited to places served by public transportation. Urban sprawl accelerated rapidly. As more and more individuals bought cars, more and more government policies in urban development began to change. The automobile, coupled with the arrival of long-distance forms of communication, such as the telephone and telegraph, meant that cities could continue to expand and become progressively more decentralized. The suburbs became pushed out further and further. Governments also began to build freeways and highways, great roads that would transport people to and from the workplaces in the city, as well as linking cities with each other. The most famous example of this in American history was the Federal Interstate Highway Act of 1956, which encouraged further urban sprawl across the continent. The automobile had transformed the landscape into real estate. Empty land, now connected by roads and cars, could gain value and be sold. For the rest of the 20th century, the automobile continued to dominate urban growth, both in the United States but also, arguably, around the world. However, in the face of worsening traffic congestion, urban decay, lack of efficient public transportation, and the scarcity of oil, we have to urgently reconsider our relationship with cars. The European Union, in a 2011 white paper on transportation, revealed that they wanted to eliminate conventionally fueled cars from all cities by 2050. It is commonly understood that people would have to rely on electric cars or on public transportation. Moves such as these and others around the world suggest that we may be about to shift towards a fourth type of city, the post-automobile city. The post-automobile city is not car-free, but is redesigned to offer infrastructure for pedestrians and those who desire to live without cars. There are more parks, gardens, pathways, pedestrian shopping streets, and bicycle lanes. Such a vision is already becoming a reality in many cities. That is where I wish to turn my attention next.
Alright, so this was the track, and right now we are going to revise what you wrote down under the note section in each year. So in pre-1880, I took down these notes. Cities were walking cities. They were small and compact. They had a mixture of residences and workplaces. The rich resided in the center of the cities. So these were the main notes discussed in pre-1880. These are the changes that happened from 1880 to 1920. Cities became known as streetcar cities. Upper classes left the city center to live in the suburbs. Cities grew around public transportation lines such as trolleys and streetcars. Then, post 1920, there were a lot of notes that you could have taken. It's okay if you have taken less notes. People had individual access to all kinds of places previously difficult to get to. Families could transport themselves wherever and whenever they wanted to. They could access the countryside or go away for the weekend. People didn't need to live close to the place where they worked. Government policies in urban development began to change. Cities continued to grow, and governments also began to build freeways and highways. And lastly, in 2011, the European Union wanted to eliminate conventionally fueled cars from all cities by 2050. people would have to rely on electric cars or on public transportation. We may be about to see the beginning of a fourth type of city, which is the post-automobile city. So these are the notes that I have taken under each period. And now we have the exercise that I told you about, اللي هو the one that depends on critical thinking. So the first sentence that we have, the automobile coupled with the arrival of long-distance forms of communication, such as the telephone and the telegraph, meant that cities could continue to expand and become progressively more decentralized. So which of the following sentences would follow this sentence logically? A. The suburbs became pushed out further and further, and B. Billboards were placed along the roads from the city center to the countryside promoting many products and services. A would follow the statement. Why? Because he is talking about how cities are going to become decentralized. So this means that they are going to expand. They are going to be pushed further and further. Number two, the automobile had transformed the landscape into real estate. Then we have two sentences. Either housing prices rose steadily in this period, or empty land, now connected by roads and cars, could gain value and be sold. Which of the following sentences should follow sentence number two logically? It's of course B, because once the automobile has transformed the landscape into real estate, one can go from one place to another very easily by his car, and so empty land that was far away and would have been hard to get to if it wasn't for the automobile began to gain value and be sold. Lastly, we have the post-automobile city is not car-free, but is redesigned to offer infrastructure for pedestrians and those who desire to live without cars. عندنا two sentences. This vision of the future gives us a city in which we can walk without the need of transport, or there are more parks, gardens, pathways, pedestrian shopping streets, and bicycle lanes. It should be B, of course, because as he has said, this doesn't mean that we will not live without any cars. No, it means that there will be less cars. So there will be more parks, pedestrian shopping streets, and so on. So this was exercise number one, and it's based on your understanding of the whole track. It's based on logical order. Exercise number two is also based on logical order, but it's a little bit different because it tests your ability to fill in the blanks. This is quite important because if you are in a lecture and you miss some of the words that your professor has said, you can always deduce it from the logical order. So we have a statement from the lecture. Number one, cities were small and compact, and they featured a mixture of residences and then we have the information that follows. People were expected to walk to work. So you should deduce the words that were missing. They don't have to be the same words that the speaker used in the track, but they should be words that make sense. Here he is talking about residences and some other place. What could it be? The information that follows is that people were expected to walk to work. So the missing word should be about work. So it could be offices, companies, or workplaces. Then we have number two, governments also began to build freeways and then he left a space. The information that follows is the most famous example of this in American history was the Federal Interstate Highway Act of 1956. So they began to build freeways and other kind of ways or other kind of roads. And he mentioned the Federal Interstate Highway Act. So we can deduce that the word is either highways or large roads. And lastly, we have the European Union in a 2011 white paper on transportation revealed that they wanted to, and then there's a space, conventionally fueled, and then again another space from all cities by 2050. The information that follows is that it's commonly understood that people would have to rely on electric cars or on public transport. So the words that we are searching for, something that was conventionally fueled, and they wanted to do something about it. What did they want to do? They wanted to stop or to reduce conventionally fueled cars or transportation. And we can deduce that from the information that follows because he mentioned electric cars or public transport. So he wanted to reduce the amount of conventionally fueled cars. So these were the two exercises that tested your critical thinking and were related to listening number 1. So now we can move on to listening number 2. Listening number 2 is divided into 3 parts and it's entitled Making Cities More Livable. But before we listen to this track, I want you to take a look at the academic keywords on page number 50 of your student book. We have criterion, a principle or a standard by which something may be judged or decided, and the plural is criteria. Criterion, of course, means معيار أو مقياس. And then we have element, which is a noun. I think most of you know it. It's an essential or characteristic part of something abstract. And lastly, we have promote, which is to support or actively encourage a cause, project, and so on, or to further the progress of something. So it's either to support something or to actively further the progress of this thing. I would like to add some extra vocabulary to the academic words. The track that you are going to listen to centers on 3 important words. First, we have resilience. Resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. اللي هي قدرة على التأقلم. Resilience also means flexibility. اللي هي مرونة. But this is usually related to objects. However, we are talking here about people. Okay, so if you are resilient, then you are able to recover quickly from misfortune. The second word is authenticity. And it's the quality of being true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. اللي هي الأصالة. And if we say that something is authentic, then it's real, it's true, it's not a replica, it's not false. And lastly, we have inclusiveness. It comes from the verb include, of course, and it's a practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. ومعناها الشمولية. So these are 3 very important definitions that we are going to encounter in track number 2. On page number 50 of your student books, you will find that the one thing that is required from you while listening to track number 2 is matching each of the 3 words that we have just discussed to its definition or its meaning in the track. Okay, we have discussed the definitions in general, but we want to know the speaker's opinion about each of these definitions or each of these words and how they are related to making cities more livable. We are going to listen to this track and we are going to match each word with its meaning.
Track 20, Unit 5, Listening 2. Making Cities More Livable, Part 1.
The world's population is rising at an increasingly rapid pace. According to a recent United Nations population publication, 2/3 of our planet's inhabitants will live in cities by the year 2050. This fast-paced urbanization around the globe produces both social and environmental challenges for city planners. In the first of our course podcasts during the second semester, we are going to focus on the term livable cities. We have invited representatives from 2 cities that have entered this year's Phillips Livable Cities Award. Unlike some livability ranking data, this award doesn't focus on salaries. It focuses on well-being. This contest will reward the most innovative and feasible ideas for improving the health and well-being of people living in cities. Let me explain the criteria for this competition. According to the Phillips think tank, there are 3 vital ingredients of a livable city. The first is resilience. This refers to a city's ability to adapt to the requirements of its citizens. The second ingredient is inclusiveness, which describes the city's ability to generate a community in all sections of the population, regardless of gender, age, or ethnicity. The final element is authenticity. This refers to the city's character and identity.
Okay, so now that you have listened to the track, we can match each word with its meaning. Number one, we have resilience, and here resilience refers to C, the city's capacity to change according to what its residents need. Then inclusiveness refers to A, the city's capacity to create an integrated society. Lastly, authenticity refers to B, how the city appears to people. The last tracks that we are going to listen to are track number 2, part 2 and 3. And we are going to listen to part 2, followed right afterwards by part 3, because the exercise that we are going to do is related to both parts. So the first part is about Copenhagen, which is the capital of Denmark. And you can see a picture of Copenhagen before you right now. And the speaker is going to talk about how this city is livable. Then in part 3, we are going to listen to an Indian speaker. So there will be an Indian accent. And the speaker is going to talk about New Delhi, which is the capital of India. He's going to discuss how they are trying to make New Delhi more livable. On page 51, you will find a table that is divided into 3 columns. You are going to listen to the tracks and fill in column number 2 and 3, the one related to Copenhagen and New Delhi. Column number 1 is the criteria. Okay, number 1 we have resilience, or how well the projects deal with economic and environmental changes, the adaptability or the flexibility of the city. And then inclusiveness, how well do the projects include all citizens? Okay, as we have said, inclusiveness means that all citizens should be included. And lastly, authenticity, how well do the projects maintain the local character of the city? The local character is of course related to how authentic the city seems. So you are going to listen to the tracks and fill in this table. Okay, so now let's listen to track number 2, part 2 about Copenhagen. And while you are listening, fill in the column about Copenhagen.
Track 20, Unit 5, Listening 2. Making Cities More Livable, Part 1.
The world's population is rising at an increasingly rapid pace. According to a recent United Nations population publication, 2/3 of our planet's inhabitants will live in cities by the year 2050. This fast-paced urbanization around the globe produces both social and environmental challenges for city planners. In the first of our course podcasts during the second semester, we are going to focus on the term livable cities. We have invited representatives from 2 cities that have entered this year's Phillips Livable Cities Award. Unlike some livability ranking data, this award doesn't focus on salaries. It focuses on well-being. This contest will reward the most innovative and feasible ideas for improving the health and well-being of people living in cities. Let me explain the criteria for this competition. According to the Phillips think tank, there are 3 vital ingredients of a livable city. The first is resilience. This refers to a city's ability to adapt to the requirements of its citizens. The second ingredient is inclusiveness, which describes the city's ability to generate a community in all sections of the population, regardless of gender, age, or ethnicity. The final element is authenticity. This refers to the city's character and identity.
Now we are going to listen to track number 2, part 3 about New Delhi. And again, while you are listening, fill in the column about New Delhi.
Track 21, Unit 5, Listening 2. Making Cities More Livable, Part 2.
So, to talk to you about what projects these 2 cities are developing this year, I'd like to welcome Maya Jorgensen from Copenhagen in Denmark and Adira Joshi from New Delhi in India.
Hello.
Good afternoon to you both. Thanks for coming along to talk to us. Maya, could you start by telling us about Copenhagen's contribution to their citizens' health and well-being?
Hello, yes, certainly. In Copenhagen, we feel that urban planners have to adapt to the needs of the people, so we believe in involving our citizens in the decision-making that will mold our city's future by consulting them as part of the urban development process. Inclusiveness is a vital part of making a city more livable. This method allows us to see what people expect from our planners. We also believe that it helps residents feel that they can help mold the present and the future of the city. So, what do people expect? Well, first of all, we now know that there is an overall acceptance that good quality architecture should always be an integral part of city planning. This gives people a certain feeling of pride in Copenhagen's identity. Our current city planning isn't only about architecture, it also includes green spaces. We know that if we make the city green, with gardens, parks and trees, it will make it an attractive place, a place where people will want to stay and not seek to escape. Rather than go outside in search of nature, people can find it right on their doorstep. A sense of community is very important to us, so we feel that where necessary, we have to introduce new ways of fostering this. Part of our recent success is integrating community functions by bringing public life into the building. We have created urban blocks that act as small communities by mixing all the different functions together. The living spaces, parks, retail areas, and leisure spaces are all assimilated into the design of the building. This gives people the opportunity to come together and enjoy their lives close to home. Moving all these elements closer together also means we can actually keep population density low and create a sense of community among our citizens. Another issue we have had to deal with is the seasonal variations in daylight because of Denmark's northern location. There are very short days during winter, as well as very long summer days. Our aim is to enhance people's lives by varying the type and amount of lighting from the dark autumn months to the longer and darker winter months. We have invested heavily in city lighting to satisfy our citizens' physical, social, and psychological needs. We believe cities should be provided with light when it is needed. We want residents to use the city at night. Well-lit environments foster creativity, social activity, and help build strong communities. It also cultivates a sense of trust and safety, which is a vital factor for people to have the freedom to enjoy our city.
Okay, so now that you have filled in the table, you can revise the answers with me. Criteria number 1, resilience. In Copenhagen, current planning includes green spaces such as parks, gardens, and trees. Lighting has been also invested in as a well-lit environment fosters creativity and social activity. And then in New Delhi, we have 2 points. They are just points or phrases. They are not whole sentences. So point number 1 is working on a scheme to reduce the amount of traffic in the center and brings the citizens back to a part of the city that is rich in heritage. And number 2, making space for more parks. Moving on to inclusiveness, in Copenhagen, part of the urban development process includes consultation with residents. And number 2, integrating community functions by bringing public life into the building has helped foster a sense of community. In New Delhi, again, these are just points, not full sentences. Number 1, developing new public areas, rejuvenating canals, and building walkways and cycle paths. And number 2, including people from all walks of life and making activities affordable for everyone. Lastly, we have authenticity. In Copenhagen, good quality architecture gives people a sense of pride in the city. And in New Delhi, they are encouraging civic pride by promoting heritage. And we have an example, which is the building of the Guru Teg Bahadur Memorial, where the teaching of the gurus are engraved on a huge monolith in the park. So we have listened today to 2 tracks, and track number 2 has 3 parts. Now we move to the language development part of the lesson, and today we are going to talk about connotation. Connotation refers to the positive and negative associations many words carry with them. When a speaker chooses words with strong positive or negative connotations, this is often an indication of his or her opinion. So if I choose a word with a positive connotation, this means that I approve of the things that I'm talking about. While if I choose a word with a negative connotation, this means that I disapprove of the topic. I could say, another plan is to improve the railway routes. I could also say, another plan is to rejuvenate the railway routes. So, improve gives a neutral connotation, but rejuvenate includes a positive connotation. This means that I strongly approve of the project that's going to improve the railway routes. So now on page 52, we have a list of words, and in each line we have 3 words, and these words are almost synonymous. However, each of these words has a different kind of connotation, and we need to choose the word that has a different connotation from the other two. So number 1, we have cramped, populous, and overcrowded. All of these words mean مزدحم. Type cramped. So when I say it's very cramped in the railway, is this a positive or a negative connotation? It's of course negative, and we will write the minus sign for negative. Populous. When I say this city is quite populous, this is considered neutral because populous is from population, but we didn't say that it's an overpopulation. So it means that there are a lot of people, but it's not a negative thing. And then we have overcrowded, which of course has a negative connotation because it's overcrowded. So which of these 3 words has a different connotation? Populous, because it's the only one that's neutral. And we have used the minus sign for the negative and the equal sign for the neutral. So number 2, we have reckon, contemplate, and reflect. They all mean to think. Number 1, we have reckon. If I say, I reckon we will have to leave early, this means that I think that we will have to leave early. Does this have a positive or a negative connotation? No, it's neutral. Then we have contemplate. If I say, for example, I am contemplating changing my major, is this positive, negative, or neutral? It's neutral. And lastly, we have reflect. If I say at the end of each year, I reflect on all the things that I have done. This is, of course, another neutral connotation. So the 3 are neutral. So how will we choose the different word? Through focusing on their meanings. Contemplate and reflect both denote that someone is thinking deeply about something. It's not just a passing thought. But reckon doesn't mean that you have to think deeply about something. No, you just come to the conclusion or think quite quickly. So reckon here is the different word. Number 3, we have growth, expansion, and sprawl. So growth, if I say, for example, they are trying to boost economic growth, is this a neutral, positive, or negative connotation? Of course, it's not a negative connotation, but it's not also a positive one. It's just neutral. Expansion. So if I say their expansion plans have come to a halt, again, expansion is neutral. It can be either positive or negative according to the context of the sentence. And lastly, we have sprawl. And of course, in this lesson, we have used it with urban sprawl. And when we use the word sprawl, it has a negative connotation. So the different word here is sprawl because it denotes something negative. So when we say urban sprawl, it's negative. We don't say urban expansion or urban growth. Number 4, struggle, strive, and endeavor. So struggle, I think most of you know it. I could say, for example, I'm struggling to keep up with my lectures. So this has a negative connotation. Then we have strive, and this means that you do a lot of great effort to achieve something. And strive to become an engineer one day. So this is of course positive. Then we have endeavor, which is basically the same meaning of strive. For example, we can say we must constantly endeavor if we are to succeed. So this is a positive meaning. So of course, the different word here is struggle because it has a negative meaning. Number 5, we have ample, enough, and abundant. They all mean enough, but ample has a positive meaning because it means more than enough. If I say, for example, I have ample time to study for the exam, it is the same as saying I have enough time to study for the exam, but ample means that you have more time, so it's positive. Enough is neutral. You just have enough time, but ample means more than enough. And the same goes for abundant, which is also positive. For example, you can say the river is abundant in fish. So enough here is the different word. Lastly, we have push out, expand, and extend. Push out, of course, has a negative connotation. If I push something out, if I push people from their homes, for example, this means that I kick them out. Expand has a neutral meaning, and extend also has a neutral meaning. So, of course, the different word here is push out because it has a negative meaning. So I added this slide for some extra vocabulary. We have reckon, which means to conclude as by a balancing of chances, hence to think or to suppose. Endeavor, which is to try hard to do or achieve something, and it's also a noun. And lastly, ample or abundant, it's an adjective and it means enough or more than enough or plentiful. We have another exercise about how different words have different connotations. Here we have choose the correct option for each sentence. Number 1, I am delighted to accept this great on behalf of our city. This great burden, load, or responsibility. Burden and load have negative connotations because they make it seem that you don't want the thing that is offered to you. لأن burden ولود معناهم عبء. Responsibility has a neutral connotation, so the answer would be responsibility because he is delighted to accept it. Number 2, this neighborhood offers you the most exuberant, refined, or ramshackle housing in the city. Exuberant is an adjective and it means characterized by a vigorously imaginative artistic style. So it's very grand. If we are talking about a person, if I say Sarah is exuberant, then it means lively. And then we have ramshackle, which is an adjective and it means in a state of severe disrepair. So in number 2, the best answer would be refined because it's just a house. So it's probably not that exuberant because it's not artistic and of course it's not ramshackle. I find the mayor extremely incompetent. He has just thrown together, set up, or assembled an urban think tank at the last minute. To throw something together means to do something at the very last minute. If I say, for example, I threw this party together in an hour, this means that I didn't plan this party, I just did it very quickly. Set up means to arrange for something to happen. So it means to prepare for something to happen. And assembled also implies that he has thought about it. So the best answer here is, of course, A, thrown together, because it was at the very last minute. Number 4, this elegant 21st century urban block pays homage to, poses as, or mimics ziggurat communities. To pay homage to someone, homage is respect shown towards someone or something you admire. When we say, for example, that this painter pays homage to Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, this means that he has painted a painting that is inspired by the Mona Lisa. So we know now the meaning of pays homage to. Then number B, we have poses as. To pose as somebody is to pretend to be somebody. To mimic something is to try to imitate something. So pose as and mimic have negative connotations. So the right answer would be pays homage to, because he described the urban block as an elegant thing. I am afraid that the dawn of the post-automobile city may mean that many workers in the car industry will have to be dismissed, cut out, or laid off. To dismiss someone is to send him away. For example, if I say the boss dismissed him, this means that he told him to leave the room. Cut out. Cut out is usually used either with objects, like for example, when a machine stops working, So if an engine or a machine cuts out, it suddenly stops working. Or when we say, for example, his father cut him out of the will, this means that his father didn't leave him any money in his will. And lay off means to end someone's employment. So of course the right word here is laid off. So these are the answers to exercise number 2. The last part of our lesson is about academic verbs. And academic verbs mean verbs that are used in academia, okay, in academic writing, in formal writing. We will just do the 2 exercises quickly. They're pretty easy. We have exercise number 1 on page 53. There can be few inventions that we know of today that have transformed the cities as much as the automobile. The verb here is transformed, and we need to choose the right definition from the sentences below. Okay, so take a moment, read the definitions carefully. They're all related to change. But of course, your choice will depend on the context of the sentence and the connotation of the verb. The number 1 transformed would be see, make something or someone completely different. Okay, to transform something, it's like the fairy godmother transformed Cinderella's dress. She made it completely different. Number 2, in Copenhagen, we feel the urban planners have to adapt to the needs of the people. The verb is adapt. And the corresponding definition would be F. Change your ideas or behavior so that you can deal with a new situation. اللي هو يتأقلم. Number 3, we may be about to shift towards a fourth type of city, the post-automobile city. So to shift means A, to consciously change your way of thinking. You are not just changing, no, you are consciously changing your way of thinking. A shift is not a change that occurs by itself. It's something that you do after deciding to do so. Number 4, we aim to develop these canals into public areas, for example, walkways and cycle paths for people to enjoy. So develop means D, change land for a particular purpose. It means to change something for a particular purpose, and here we used land, of course, because he's talking about the canals. Number 5, our aim is to enhance people's lives by varying the type and amount of lighting from the dark autumn months to the longer and darker winter months. So here varying means making changes in something in order to give more diversity. This would be B. And lastly, we have, if we look at the history of urban growth in the United States, we can see that our cities have gradually evolved due to the automobile. Of course, it will be progressively change over a period of time. So why are they called academic verbs? Because if you are writing in a non-academic way, you can use the verb change in all of these sentences. Maybe the only sentence that we can't use change in is sentence number 2, because adapt to quite specific. But the rest of the sentences, we can probably use the word change instead of the academic verb. But since we are studying the English language and we are writing academically, we need to use academic verbs, verbs that are quite specific in their meanings. This is quite important because this is what distinguishes one student from another when your teacher or instructor is grading your essays. Moving on to exercise number 2, we need to use the same verbs that we just discussed that are related to change and fill in the blanks. Number 1, we really need to our methods of gathering information from the public. We have to appeal to people from all walks of life. زي ما قلنا ممكن نستخدم هنا كلمة change بكل بساطة، لكن احنا عايزين نستخدم حاجة specific، حاجة academic. So we really need to do what? To vary our methods of gathering information, because he is talking about appealing to people from all walks of life, yani from different social strata. So vary is related to different things. In the future, cities will have to adapt to new challenges. This is quite simple because adapt is very specific, so you can't even use the word change here. And number 3, that would be impossible because we have naturally into an urban society. If something occurred naturally throughout time, then it means that it has evolved. And lastly, he is the nation's most celebrated architect because he totally city centers up and down the country. So he totally what? Transformed. He changed them completely. He's the most celebrated architect, so he has transformed them. Thank you for watching this lecture. Stay tuned for the next listening lecture.